Next on Currents News, President Donald Trump at the NATO summit. He's criticized Germany and complained about dealings with Russia. You'll hear from him next. The latest on the families separated after illegally crossing the border and a situation in New York. For the first time, they're all together and safe. The good news from Thailand and the boys rescued from that cave. Plus, Brooklyn's Bishop Nicholas DeMarzio welcomes a large number of priests coming to the diocese to help out for the summer. The news starts right now. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. President Trump arrived at the NATO headquarters this morning, and the summit got contentious. The U.S. Commander-in-Chief has roundly denounced allies for not spending enough on defense. When the president was face-to-face with them, he didn't hold back. Natasha Chen reports the latest on the tense diplomatic twists and turns.
Germany is totally controlled by Russia.
Before the NATO summit even started, President Trump asked how member nations are supposed to be protecting each other from Russia when Germany is reliant on Russia for natural gas.
If you look at it, Germany is a captive of Russia because they got rid of their coal plants, they got rid of their nuclear. They're getting so much of the oil and gas from Russia.
In fact, Germany gets 35% of its imported natural gas from Russia. And keep in mind, Trump is also meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin at a summit in Helsinki next week. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who was born in Soviet-occupied East Germany, fired back.
Because of current events, I want to add that I myself lived through a part of Germany being controlled by the Soviet Union. And I am very happy that today we are united in freedom as the Federal Republic of Germany, and that we can also say that we manage our independent policies.
But when Trump and Merkel met in person, they played nice in front of the cameras.
We're having a great meeting. We're discussing military expenditure. We're talking about trade. We have a very, very good relationship with the Chancellor.
Echoing the G7 summit last month, Trump is infuriating some of the U.S.'s closest allies. NATO members are pledging to spend 2% of their gross domestic product on defense spending by 2024. But President Trump tried to move the goalpost, saying it should be 4%. Natasha Chen, Currents News.
While the president is overseas, his administration is ready to fire new salvos in the trade war with China. Chinese goods worth $200 billion are being targeted for 10% tariffs. The products include minerals, seafood, and personal care items such as shampoo and soap. Beijing wasted no time firing back, vowing to retaliate against American items with similar levies. The Chinese put out a statement saying the U.S. is, quote, accelerating and escalating the trade war. In North Korea, photos of Kim Jong-un inspecting construction sites are being released by state media. At the same time, sources are saying last week's meetings that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had in Pyongyang didn't go well. An insider is quoted saying the North Koreans were just messing around and not serious about moving forward. A promised sit-down with Kim never happened. The Trump administration is working to reunite families that were separated after illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, but it didn't meet a court-ordered deadline. Getting everyone back together has not been easy. Currents News' Tim Harfman is here with the latest situation. Tim, what can you tell us?
Liz, by Tuesday's deadline, some migrant children were reunited with their parents, but as many as 2,000 more remain separated. At a rally in East Harlem this morning, protesters demanded that every child be reunited immediately and called the separation inhumane.
Shame! 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 Shame!
Faith leaders, politicians, and other New Yorkers gathered to show solidarity with over 2,000 children who have been separated from their families.
This is not acceptable. This is not our America.
The Trump administration has started reuniting some children with their mothers and fathers. 102 migrants under the age of 5 were required to be back in their parents' arms Tuesday. But the federal government says because of obstacles, less than half had been reunited.
The remaining ones are children whose parents didn't confirm to be parents. They were lying about being parents. They're demonstrably unfit. We've got one alleged to be a murderer, one who's a kidnapper, one rapist, one who's a trafficker, one alleged by the child to be a child abuser. We've got another 23 who are unavailable because they're in Marshals Service custody or jails or have been deported.
The scheduled reunions are taking place at various sites across the country. Children have been detained in shelters far from their parents. Many of the young migrants were detained as part of the Trump administration's zero-tolerance enforcement policy at the border. But protesters outside of this Cayuga Center in East Harlem say that is not enough. They say inside this facility alone, there are hundreds of migrant children who were separated at the U.S.-Mexico border. Protesters say the Cayuga Center you see behind me is overcrowded, with nearly 600 children spending their days here and their nights in foster homes. Ricardo Dianda is a lawyer representing one family in Texas. Migrating from Honduras, the parents and children were separated at the border. Two of the children, ages 9 and 5, are inside the East Harlem Center. The mother is being detained by ICE and has only been permitted one phone call to her children.
I want you to know that she is a strong woman. She is fighting for her children. They may have her behind bars, but they have not incarcerated her spirit or her soul.
As of now, it is unclear when the family will be reunited. As more children are being reunited with their parents, protesters say they won't stop until every family is together. Elected officials have direct messages for the administration.
Your children are not only the children in the White House, these are your children too. Treat them with the honor and dignity and respect that you would want bestowed on your family if you weren't president of the United States.
What are you hiding, Donald Trump, Pence, all those that are associated right now? What are you hiding?
Also on Tuesday, a plane carrying 24 Guatemalan migrants landed back in their homeland. These were families that had been separated after crossing into the U.S., then reunited and deported. Liz?
Tim, children under the age of 5 were required to be reunited by yesterday, but what about the other kids?
A judge has instructed the government and immigration attorneys to discuss the remaining cases. Tomorrow there should be information on how children ages 6 and older will be reunited. The deadline for those reunions is June 26th. Liz.
All right, Tim, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you very much for that report. The Vatican's top UN ambassador, Archbishop Bernardito Auza, is pushing the world to make migration a safer and more orderly process. The Holy See is firmly behind a global compact on migration that's in the works at the UN, but Archbishop Auza is urging changes in the draft document because it doesn't match the protections found in international law. He said, quote, "All persons, regardless of their migration status, enjoy the same human rights and have the same fundamental freedoms. Migrants are first and foremost human beings." An exclamation point to the dramatic rescues of those schoolboys from the cave. For the first time, we're seeing video of them together above ground. They're being treated in the same ward at a Thailand hospital. The risk of infection is a concern. The youngsters are waving to family members through protective glass. And video of the Navy SEAL diver saving the boys is being released by the Thai government. The images show rescuers accompanying the kids as they're evacuated from the cave on stretchers. Each life-saving mission lasted about 9 hours, and for 2/3 of the time, the boys were underwater. Now that the 12 kids, their soccer coach, all the divers and other rescuers are safe and sound, David McKenzie was able to go into the cave for an eyewitness look at the conditions that exist a half a mile underground.
This is the spectacular entrance of the Tham Luang cave system, and the boys had no idea when they came in here that the rains would flow in and that their saga would capture the world's attention. But they had to flee deeper into the cave system as the water streamed in, and it was here where the rescuers first mobilized to get them out. The boys survived by drinking water from the roof, and they didn't eat any food for 9 days. You can imagine their joy when a British diver popped up through the water 9 days after they went missing. Everyone thought that they were dead, and that was the beginning of this incredible rescue mission. When they started their mission, the water was much higher than where it is now. You can see the measuring stick, and they pumped water out 24 hours a day for days and days down the mountain. That allowed them the space in the roof of the caverns to get in with those expert divers and a short enough distance to bring the boys out. And the last people to emerge were the 4-time Navy SEALs after those incredible days of rescue. No one thought they could pull this rescue off, but they did, using a combination of expert divers and incredible teamwork. David McKenzie inside the cave in Chiang Rai.
Oh, their families and the world overjoyed. The latest now on the battle to get Brett Kavanaugh confirmed to the Supreme Court. The nominee returned to Capitol Hill today for meetings with key Republican senators while Democrats ramped up efforts to block the confirmation. Utah Republican Orrin Hatch called the judge a very fine man and said he expects the hearings to go well. President Trump selected Judge Kavanaugh to replace the retiring Anthony Kennedy. Meantime, there are worries tonight that anti-Catholic bigotry could emerge during the confirmation process. Op-ed pieces in the Washington Post and USA Today cite criticism that's already been leveled against the judge's religious beliefs. The faith has become a big issue in Supreme Court selections, primarily over fears that Roe v. Wade legalizing abortion might be overturned. Warnings tonight up and down the East Coast. Hurricane Chris, now swirling in the Atlantic, is rapidly strengthening and could cause life-threatening surf and rip currents. Right now, Chris is a Category 2 storm with sustained winds of 105 miles an hour. It's the first hurricane that strong in the Atlantic this year. Rough seas are forecast for the East Coast all week. There's a lot more news headed your way. Does God not live here anymore? That's the question asked as many churches close down. I'll speak with Claire Jean Gravet in Rome for the latest on what the Vatican is doing to protect the sacred sites. Bishop DiMarzio tells us about the effort to bring a large number of priests to the diocese for the summer, and an update from Ireland after the Catholic country was rocked by that abortion referendum. Pope Francis will be there soon. And do you have a story idea, something happening in your parish we should know about? We want to hear from you, so please keep this email handy. News tips at ToSalesMedia.org. We'll be right back. Keep a sharp eye this summer. Some new priests may be visiting a parish near you. Over 80 priests from 11 different countries are coming to work for the Diocese of Brooklyn throughout the months of July and August. The Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio, welcomed this year's group of visiting clerics in Mass today. The bishop is an expert on immigration and is saying that helping the men come to the U.S. legally has been a challenge.
Immigration is very strict today, so we have to apply usually almost a year in advance so we can get the proper visa so they can come here and are allowed to do religious work. So that's been another challenge most recently, how complicated it's become.
And despite the extra effort to get the priests into the country, the bishop is happy to have the clergymen here in the diocese. Does God not live here anymore? That question is being asked more frequently these days. Once thriving churches are being closed because a growing number of people just don't attend as secularization sweeps over the West. The Vatican is determined to rescue these forgotten religious sites and not let them become discos or gymnasiums or even ice cream shops. The faith and culture correspondent for Crux, Claire Jean Gravet, joins us now from Rome. Claire, you are on top of this story. I got to know from you, what steps are being planned by the Holy See to ensure that these buildings do maintain some spiritual value?
Well, hi, Liz. First of all, the Vatican is bringing together a whole team that's comprised of the Pontifical Council for Culture, the Italian Bishops' Conference, and the Gregorian University in Rome to come together in order to offer guidelines in collaboration from countries from all over the world that are concerned about their beautiful churches and what is going to happen to them, and provide just opportunities for other people who are facing these problems to understand, how do you treat a place that is no longer the house of God? That's really the question.
Claire, let's look at the sheer scope of this. Where is the issue most prominent? Because there are more than 100,000 churches in Italy alone.
Yes, there's a constellation of churches in Rome. About 65,000 are still in the hands of the Vatican. That's a lot to take care of. And if you consider that some are broken down, run down, secularization, leading to a lot of people not only not coming to the pews, but also priests who are not there to take care of it and take care of the upkeeping of some of these churches that have all the patronage of the arts that we are so fond of and that we're so proud of as Catholics. So obviously this represents a big challenge in Italy, and that's why the Italian Bishops' Conference has a special role to play.
And there are some complexities to the issue, correct? What are some of the questions that the church must wrestle with in deciding how to handle underutilized churches?
Well, listen, churches are beautiful spaces. They're gorgeous, high vaulted, complex, and sometimes it's just really hard to take care of. In those occasions, privates come in and they buy the property, especially if a diocese is struggling financially. That means that you have to find a way to communicate with private entities and make sure that this place still is respected and treated as it's supposed to. And this is what the guidelines are really trying to offer.
I'm going to put some perspective to this, Claire, and hopefully you can help me. Given the massive scope of Catholic properties around the world, does the Vatican have an exact number of struggling or abandoned churches?
Unfortunately, it's very hard for the Vatican to keep track of the large number of properties that it holds, but Nunzio Galantino, the recently made cardinal by Pope Francis, former head of the Italian Bishop Conference, and now leader of APSA, which takes care of the Vatican treasuries, is the man who's on the job for this. So if there's one guy who's going to have the opportunity to look at the paperwork and know those numbers, that's him, that's Galantino.
Many of these buildings are adorned with magnificent artwork. How will these treasures be preserved?
Well, of course, conversation with private entities is very important, but one thing that led to hope for these spokesmen for the Vatican was that lay people should be involved in trying to save their patronage and trying to save their traditions and culture. So getting lay people on board is always a track to success for the Vatican on many, many issues.
Oh, Claire, thank you so much for putting this in perspective. I really appreciate your insight as always, and we'll be looking to hear more from you about this particular case. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Children with autism are nearly twice as likely not to go to Mass. That's what the National Survey of Children's Health is finding. And the researchers are saying religious institutions could do a better job in making children with limited social interactions feel welcome in church. A series of studies also found regular Mass attendance generally produces improved mental and emotional health. There are many questions across Ireland's current religious landscape after the referendum opening the door to abortion. Tonight, an update on the state of Irish Catholicism ahead of Pope Francis's visit for the World Meeting of Families next month. Melissa Butts reports.
Irish priest and professor at the Gregorian University, Jared Whelan, says this is not necessarily true, but rather a result of centuries-old history. He asserts that Catholics were shamed for any wrongdoing and forced to migrate to England, just one of the many mistakes the church made during a period of time where it abused power, both spiritually and politically.
In recent times, then, the decisions that we Catholics would really regret, such as the referendum on same-sex marriage, the abortion referendum recently, they all have the background of Irish people wanting to assert their adult individuality over against a Catholic Church that had a control of social mores in a particular way.
In a 2016 census, 78% of people identified as Catholic and less than half practiced weekly. Despite these numbers, he said shock is still the reaction to the most recent referendum, legalizing abortion.
The immediate effect of this abortion referendum is one of shock on all practicing Catholics, I think, are certainly the bishops, priests, my fellow Jesuits, did not expect that the vote would be so emphatically in favour of abortion as it was.
Yet with the Pope coming to Ireland in August for the World Meeting of Families, this Jesuit professor says many are feeling one emotion for the upcoming visit: awkwardness.
So we are in a state of some disarray in the Catholic Church in Ireland, even in these months after the abortion referendum. So there's an awkwardness to hosting this international meeting on families and hosting the Pope. The Pope knows perfectly well that this is a frontier situation of cultural change in Ireland, of decline of the Catholic Church in various ways. he's perfectly happy just to launch into such a situation and to do what he can.
The Pope's presence alone can ignite excitement and help evangelize works, ideas, and values for the long term. Thus, instead of reprimanding the Irish citizens, as was done in the past, the Holy Father might address broader cultural and family values that he so often speaks about. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
Religious groups in Canada are up in arms. They're opposing a government requirement that participants in a summer jobs program must pledge to support abortion. Each year, some 70,000 jobs are backed with government grants. Under a new rule, to be eligible for the money, the applicants must affirm that abortion is a human right. Lawsuits are being planned. More Americans are having babies without getting married. That's the new finding from the Pew Research Center. There's been a large increase of couples living together and having children, up 15% in 2 decades. Pew also said the median age of marriage in the U.S. in 2017 was 29 for men and 27 for women, the oldest on record. Meantime, more of Obamacare is being cut back. The Trump administration slicing more than $50 million from the program named The Navigator. It is an online portal that helps consumers and insurance coverage. But according to government records, only about 1% of people who signed up for Obamacare use The Navigator. Now only $10 million will go to the portal. Still to come on Currents News, a tribute to an American hero who is finally home 7 decades after he protected the nation during World War II. I'll have the moving story. We'll be right back. On behalf of a grateful nation, the solemn presentation of an American flag to the next of kin. Judith Bingham's older brother left for war when she was 4 years old. She's waited her entire life for him to come home, and despite being separated by decades of unanswered questions, their bond, although short-lived, remains strong thanks to her fond memories.
He really loved me a lot because I was little and he played with me a lot.
Private Kenneth Dale Farris, who went by Dale, died in November of 1944 during World War II in Germany, disappearing without a trace.
He stepped off into a minefield. They didn't find him. There were no dog tags. There was no name.
His baby sister Judith spent decades searching, never giving up hope that someday some sign of his existence would surface. And then, in late April, the phone call she'd been waiting for. The Army and DNA records had identified her brother's remains buried in an unmarked grave in the Netherlands. She was overcome with emotion.
I just started crying. I said, "Are you sure that's my brother?" And he said, "Yes, we're sure."
A little sister's promise to bring her big brother, her hero, home, finally fulfilled.
I wished so much that he could come home. We wanted him home. This is his home.
Oh, closure after so many years. Finally, U.S. Army Private Kenneth D. Farris will be laid to rest in Dallas-Fort Worth National Cemetery. We thank you, sir, for your service to our country. May you rest in peace. That is Currents News. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Liz Faublas. Set your DVR to record this program so you never miss it, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.